we are going to start using the distance and midpoint formulas. This is review, so I'm going to go very quickly through this. The first thing that we're going to use is the Pythagorean theorem, which is c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared. Now, we're going to derive the distance formula based on the Pythagorean theorem. And as you can see over here, I've written a small graph with a couple of points. Now, if we connect some dots like this, we end up with a right triangle, which is why we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. Now, if we look at this, and if we treat this side like A, and the vertical side like B, then if we subtract our x's, we get A, and if we subtract our y's, we get B. And we substitute that into the Pythagorean theorem. The hypotenuse C, right here, that actually is the distance between the 2 points. So I'm going to replace c squared with d squared. And instead of A, I'm going to write x2 minus x1 squared, and then y2 minus y1 squared. And we don't want d squared, we want d, so we'll take the square root. And this is the distance formula that we memorized a while back, and you need to re-memorize it. So this is our distance formula. It's really the Pythagorean theorem. Let's do a practice problem with it. So we want to find the distance between these 2 points. And when you're learning an equation, you really should write it every time until you've got it memorized. So we're going to do that. And then we're just going to substitute in our numbers. So let's subtract our x's. So negative 2, nope, 0 minus 6 squared minus plus negative 2 minus 2 squared. Now those parentheses are really important, so don't leave them out. So negative 6 squared, that's a positive 36. And negative 4 squared, that's a positive 16. And that gives us a square root of 52, which is equal to 2 square root 13. Now, below this, you see the midpoint formula. The midpoint is the same as taking an average of 2 grades. It finds a number in the middle. And so, midpoint also is something that you should have memorized. And until you memorize it, you should write it down every time. And the midpoint is not a number. The distance was a number. Midpoint is a coordinate. It's an ordered pair, which is why we're writing it in parentheses like this. So we want to find the midpoint of the line segment of these 2 points right here, 4, 1, and 1, negative 5. And so we're going to add our x's, so 4 plus 1, divide by 2, and then 1 plus negative 5, so that's just 1 minus 5, and divide that by 2. So we have 5 over 2 and negative 4 over 2. And since this is really a point on a graph, mixed numbers can be easier to deal with when it comes to graphing. So 2.5, negative 2 is our midpoint. So we did a brief review on these things so that we could get into a new concept. And this new concept is finding the perpendicular bisector of a segment. And I've put the steps on here for you, and I'm going to read really quickly for them. We're going to use slope and midpoint. Now slope, your slope formula, I've written in right here for you. Another formula you need to memorize. So you're going to start with finding the slope of the segment, and then you're going to find the slope of the perpendicular bisector. If you remember, the perpendicular slopes are negative reciprocals, which means you're going to flip whatever you get for the slope of your AB, flip it over, change the sign. The second step that we're going to follow is to find the midpoint. So we're going to use the midpoint formula, which we did on the previous page. Then we're going to use the two pieces of information that we've just got, and we are going to find the equation of the perpendicular bisector. So what we're looking for is the equation of a line, and we're going to use the point slope formula, which is another one that we are supposed to have memorized right here. Okay, so we're going to skip ahead to the next slide, and there will be a separate video for this last method using the distance formula. So we're going to do our example, and we're going to do the alternate method in a different video. Now, for the last example, we want to find the equation for the perpendicular bisector. So we're going to start with finding the slope of between A and B, and I want to zoom in a little bit, make it easier to write. So we're going to start with subtracting our y's in the numerator. So negative 3 minus 5 over 9 minus 3. So that gives me negative 8 over 3. And that's not correct. So I subtracted wrong. So there we go. 6. And that reduces to negative 4 over 3. There we go. Okay, but that's not the slope of our perpendicular bisector. The slope of our perpendicular bisector is 3 over 4. And let's take just a moment here and let's put a little picture up. What I'm talking about when I say perpendicular bisector is that if we were to graph our 2 points, what we're looking for is the point that is right in the middle, which is why we need the midpoint, that is perpendicular. So we're looking for the equation of this line right there. So that's the point of what we're doing. Okay, so now let's find our midpoint. So our midpoint is a coordinate, and we're going to add our x's, which gives us a 12, divided by 2, add our y's, which gives us a 2, divide that by 2, and so our midpoint is 6, 1, and that's what that little point right there would be. So we're going to take the slope that we just found and the point that we just found, and we're going to substitute it into the point slope formula. The point slope formula takes you directly to the equation of the line without having to solve for b and then plug it back in. So y minus the y coordinate from our midpoint, our slope of our perpendicular bisector, and then the x coordinate of our midpoint. So we're going to distribute the 3/4, and when you multiply that fraction, that actually gives you 9 over 2. And then I want to add the 1 to both sides. Now, 1 is the same as 2 over 2. So this gives us y is equal to 3 over 4x minus 7 over 2. Now, the way that we want the equation of our line listed is in standard form, which means x and y are on the same side of the equation, and we have no fractions. So we're going to start by multiplying everything by 4. Subtract 4y from both sides. And we're going to add 14 to both sides. And I know I've got a lot going on here. So what this gives me is 14 is equal to 3x minus 4y. And that's the equation of our perpendicular bisector. Watch for the next video for method 2 on how to find this perpendicular bisector.